Ambassador Kelvith, of the Varani Dominion, stood at the tall windows of his office and watched the ships come and go from the space station. He had spent 40 years trying to understand Earth and its people. 40 years of meetings, conversations, and careful study, and still, humans remained the greatest mystery in known space. It had started simply enough. When Varani exploration ships first found Earth, they expected what they always found: a young species, a primitive world, people who would be grateful for contact with the stars. Every other species had reacted the same way. They wanted protection. They wanted technology. They wanted to join the Galactic Concord and take their place among the great civilizations. Humans did none of these things. They smiled politely at the Varani diplomats. They accepted observer status in the Concord. They sent ambassadors to the great station at the center of the galaxy. And then they sat in their seats during every council meeting and said almost nothing, year after year, decade after decade. Century after century, Kelvith turned away from the window and looked at the reports on his desk. The situation was getting worse every day. The Harrow Swarm had attacked 12 more systems in the past month. Billions of people were dead. Entire civilizations were running for their lives. And still, Earth remained silent. He picked up the latest message from the Concord Council. It was the same demand they had sent 100 times before. Why won't the humans help us? What are they waiting for? Don't they understand that we are all dying? Kelvith understood their frustration. He felt it himself every time he spoke with Earth's ambassador, Dr. Evelyn. Okonkwo was a small woman with dark skin and gray hair. She had kind eyes and a gentle voice. She was also the most frustrating person Kelvith had ever met. He found her in the observation deck as he often did. She was standing alone, watching the stars. Her hands were folded behind her back, and her face showed nothing. "Ambassador Okonkwo," he said, walking up to stand beside her. "I need to speak with you, of course, Ambassador Kelvith." Her voice was calm and warm. It was always calm and warm, no matter what he said to her. "How can I help you?" "The council met this morning. They voted to send another formal request to Earth." He paused. "They want to know why humanity refuses to join the war against the swarm." Okonkwo nodded slowly. "I understand their concern. Do you?" Kelvith could not keep the anger from his voice. "My homeworld is gone, Ambassador. The swarm consumed it 6 months ago. 14 billion of my people died in a single day, and Earth did nothing. I am sorry for your loss." Her voice was soft. "Truly I am, and help us." Kelvith grabbed her arm. It was a violation of diplomatic rules, but he was past caring. "You have ships. You have weapons. You have the technology to make a difference. Why do you just sit there and watch us die?" Okonkwo looked at his hand on her arm. Then she looked up at his face. Her eyes were sad, but her expression did not change. "Humanity observes," she said quietly. "Humanity remembers. But humanity is not yet ready to speak." It was the same answer she always gave. The same words, repeated like a prayer. Kelvith released her arm and stepped back. "The council is losing patience," he said. "There are some who say Earth is as bad as the swarm, that you are content to watch the galaxy burn as long as your own worlds are safe. I know what they say about us, and it does not bother you." Okonkwo was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. "It bothers me more than you can possibly imagine." Kelvith stared at her. For just a moment he thought he saw something in her eyes. Pain, grief, the weight of terrible secrets. But then it was gone, and she was the calm, unreadable diplomat once again. "I must return to my duties," she said. "Please give my regards to the council." She walked away, leaving Kelvith alone with the stars. He did not understand. None of them did. For 300 years, humanity had watched the galaxy tear itself apart. They had watched wars and plagues and disasters. They had watched the swarm emerge from the dark spaces between galaxies and begin its terrible feast. And through it all, they had done nothing but observe. What were they waiting for? The question haunted Kelvith as he made his way back to his office. He passed groups of refugees in the corridors. Families from a dozen different species, their homes destroyed, their lives shattered. They looked at him with desperate eyes, hoping for news of salvation. He had nothing to give them. The war was going badly. Everyone knew it, even if no one wanted to say it out loud. The Concorde's fleets had been defeated at every major battle. The swarm adapted too quickly. It learned from every fight, changed its tactics, evolved new defenses. Nothing seemed to work against it for long. Some species had already given up. They were building generation ships, hoping to flee to distant galaxies where the swarm might never find them. Others were making desperate last stands, fighting to the death rather than run. And Earth just watched. Kelvith reached his office and sat down heavily in his chair. He was tired. Tired of fighting. Tired of losing. Tired of hoping for help that never came. His computer showed a new message from Concorde Intelligence. He opened it without much interest. It was probably another report of another defeat, another world lost, another million dead. But as he read the report, his eyes grew wide. Earth's shipyards had gone dark. All of them. The satellites that watched human space could no longer detect any activity. No ships coming or going. No communication signals, nothing. It was as if Earth had simply disappeared. Kelvith read the report 3 times. His hearts were beating fast now. What did this mean? Were the humans finally preparing to run, like so many others? Or was something else happening? He thought of Okonkwo's sad eyes. He thought of her words. Humanity is not yet ready to speak. Not yet ready. The words echoed in his mind as he stared at the dark screen. What were the humans planning? What had they been doing for 300 years while the galaxy watched and wondered? Kelvith did not know the answer. But for the first time in a very long while, he felt something strange stirring in his chest. It felt almost like hope, Dr. Evelyn. Okonkwo had not slept well in 15 years. Every night she closed her eyes and saw the faces. Children from Varani Prime, crying for their mothers as the sky turned black with swarm ships. Elderly Rilani scholars refusing to leave their libraries as the flames grew closer. Young soldiers from a dozen different species, brave and terrified. Dying in battles they could not win. She had watched them all die. She had the power to help them. And she had done nothing. Tonight was no different. She sat in her private quarters on the station, staring at the casualty reports on her screen. The numbers were so large that they had lost all meaning. 14 billion dead this week. 23 billion the week before. Entire species reduced to scattered refugees. Their homeworlds nothing but ash and bone. A soft knock came at her door. "Come in," she said without looking up. Her aide, a young man named Thomas Chen, entered the room. He was the grandson of Admiral Chen, one of the architects of Earth's great plan. Like his grandfather, he carried the weight of humanity's secret with quiet dignity. "The council session ended an hour ago," Thomas said. "Ambassador Kelvith spoke against us. He called humans the greatest cowards in galactic history." Okonkwo closed her eyes. "He lost his homeworld. He has every right to be angry." The other delegates agreed with him. There was talk of expelling Earth from the Concorde entirely. "Let them talk." Okonkwo turned off her screen and stood up. She walked to the window and looked out at the stars. In a few days, none of it will matter. Thomas moved to stand beside her. "Is it really time? Are we truly ready?" The message came this morning. Project Prometheus is complete. All systems are ready for deployment. 300 years of work. 300 years of silence. And now, finally, we can speak. Thomas was quiet for a moment. "Do you think they will forgive us for waiting so long?" It was the question that haunted every human who knew the truth. Okonkwo had asked herself the same thing 1,000 times. "Some will," she said slowly. "Some will understand that we had no choice, that if we had revealed ourselves too soon, the swarm would have adapted. It would have learned our weaknesses and destroyed us along with everyone else and the others. The others will hate us forever." Her voice was heavy with grief. "They will look at the graves of their loved ones and curse the name of Earth. They will teach their children that humans are monsters who watch the galaxy burn." She turned to face Thomas. "And they will be right." Thomas shook his head. "That is not fair. We did what we had to do Fair has nothing to do with it. Okonkwo walked back to her desk and picked up a small photograph. It showed a young girl with bright eyes and a wide smile. Her granddaughter, who lived on Earth and had no idea what her grandmother truly did. Every day for 15 years, I have made a choice, Okonkwo said. I chose to let people die so that more people could live. I chose silence over action, patience over mercy. I chose the future over the present. She set the photograph down gently. That choice was necessary, but it was not innocent, and I will carry the weight of it until the day I die. Thomas had no answer to that. There was no answer. Every human leader who knew the truth carried the same burden. The plan had been born 300 years ago. When Earth first made contact with the galaxy, humanity's leaders had looked at the Concorde and seen the truth that no one else wanted to admit. The galaxy was not prepared for real danger. The great civilizations had grown soft. They fought small wars over territory and resources. They had forgotten how to face extinction, so humanity had made a choice. Instead of joining the Concorde's games of politics and power, they would watch and learn. They would study every species, every technology, every strategy. They would build in secret, preparing for the day when a true threat emerged. That day had come 30 years ago. When the Harrow Swarm first appeared, other species saw the swarm and panicked. They threw their fleets at the enemy in desperate, uncoordinated attacks. They shared their weapons and tactics openly, not realizing that the swarm learned from every battle. Every defeat made the enemy stronger. Every weapon revealed was a weapon neutralized. Humanity did not make that mistake. For 30 years, Earth's scientists had studied the swarm from the shadows. They had mapped its hive mind, identified its weaknesses, and built weapons specifically designed to exploit them. They had constructed a fleet larger and more powerful than anything the galaxy had ever seen, hidden in the dark spaces where no one thought to look, and they had waited. The waiting was the hardest part. Every day, Okonkwo received reports of new atrocities. Every day, she could have given the order to act. Every day, she chose not to, because the plan required patience. The swarm had to be drawn out, spread thin across the galaxy. Its patterns had to be fully mapped. Its every adaptation had to be predicted and countered before the first shot was fired. One chance. That was all humanity would get. If they moved too soon, if the swarm learned about their weapons before the trap was ready, everything would be lost. Not just Earth, but the entire galaxy. So Okonkwo had watched, and waited, and carried the weight of 1 billion deaths on her shoulders. But now, finally the waiting was over. She activated her secure communication channel. The face of Admiral Chen appeared on the screen. He looked as tired as she felt, his gray hair thin, and his eyes shadowed with the same grief that haunted them all. "Ambassador," he said, "I assume you received our message." "I did. Is it truly ready? Every ship, every weapon, every strategy we have developed over 3 centuries. Chun's voice was steady, but she could hear the emotion beneath it. "We have one shot at this, Evelyn. One chance to end the swarm forever. If we fail, there is no backup plan." Okonkwo nodded slowly. "Then we must not fail. The fleet will begin moving into position within the hour. We estimate 72 hours until all units are ready for deployment." Chen paused. "What about the council? Will you tell them?" Okonkwo thought of Kelveth's angry face. She thought of all the delegates who had cursed Earth's name and called her people cowards. She thought of the hatred they would feel when they learned the truth. And then she thought of the hope they would feel when they saw humanity's fleet emerge from the darkness. "I will request an emergency session," she said. "Full council, every delegate, every species, and what will you tell them?" Okonkwo smiled for the first time in 15 years. It was a tired smile, full of pain and relief and determination. "I will tell them that humanity is ready to speak, and that the swarm's days are numbered." She ended the call and stood alone in her quarters for a long moment. Then she straightened her shoulders, smoothed her diplomatic robes, and walked out to face the galaxy. The silence was over now. It was time to roar. The grand chamber of the Galactic Concorde had never been so. Full representatives from over 1,000 species filled the circular hall. They sat in their designated seats, rising up in great rings toward the domed ceiling far above. Many were wounded. Some were the last survivors of their entire civilizations. All of them were angry, and all of them were looking at the single human woman standing at the central podium. Dr. Evelyn Okonkwo stood, perfectly still under the weight of 1,000 hostile stares. She could feel their hatred pressing against her like a physical force. 300 years of silence had earned humanity no friends. The galaxy saw Earth as cowards at best, monsters at worst. Today, she would change everything. Ambassador Kelvith rose from his seat before she could speak. His voice echoed through the vast chamber, thick with fury and grief. "You dare to call an emergency session?" he demanded. "You, whose people have sat in silence while the galaxy burned? You who watched my world die and did nothing?" A rumble of agreement swept through the chamber. Delegates shouted their support for the Varani ambassador. "My people called for help," Kelvith continued. "We sent messages to Earth begging for assistance. Do you know what your government said? They said they were still observing, still learning." He spat the words like poison. 14 billion of my people died, Ambassador, and you were still learning." Okonkwo let him speak. She let his words wash over her. She had earned every one of them. When he finally fell silent, she took a breath and began. "Ambassador Kelvith speaks the truth," she said. Her voice was calm and clear, carrying to every corner of the chamber. Humanity watched his world die. We watched the R'Lani cluster fall. We watched the battle of shattered hope, and saw the Concord's finest fleets reduced to debris. The chamber grew quiet. This was not what they had expected. For 300 years, we have watched this galaxy tear itself apart. We have watched wars and plagues and famines. We have watched empires rise and fall. And through it all, we have said almost nothing. A R'Lani delegate stood up. Her scales were scarred from chemical burns, and one of her arms was missing. "Then why are you here now?" she demanded. "To apologize? To explain? Words will not bring back the dead, human." "No," Okonkwo agreed. "Words will not bring back the dead. But I did not come here to offer words." She touched a control on the podium. The lights in the chamber dimmed, and a holographic display appeared in the air above her head. "I came here to offer you victory." The display showed a star map of the galaxy. Red marks covered nearly half of it, showing the territory consumed by the swarm. But then new symbols began to appear. Blue dots. Thousands of them, hidden in the dark spaces between stars. "For 300 years, humanity has been watching," Okonkwo said. "But we have not been idle. We have been preparing." The blue dots began to move, resolving into shapes, ships. Massive warships of designs no one in the chamber had ever seen before. The display zoomed in, showing the details. Dreadnoughts the size of small moons. Carriers bristling with weapons that glowed with strange light. Fighters and destroyers and support vessels by the thousand. The chamber was completely silent. 12,000 capital ships, Okonkwo said. 400,000 support craft. Weapons that your scientists will tell you are impossible. Shields that break the laws of physics as you understand them. Technology that we have been developing for 3 centuries, in secret, for this single purpose. Kelvith had risen to his feet. His face was pale, his eyes wide. "This is a trick," he whispered. "It must be a trick. It is no trick." Okonkwo met his gaze. "For 30 years, we have studied the swarm. We have mapped its hive mind. We have identified every node, every connection, every weakness in its network. We have developed weapons specifically designed to destroy it. Tactics it has never encountered, strategies it cannot adapt to." She paused, letting her words sink in. "It did not help you before because we were not ready. If we had revealed ourselves too soon, the swarm would have learned about our weapons. It would have adapted, evolved, found counters to everything we built. We would have become just another defeated species, and the galaxy would have lost its last hope." The R'Lani delegate spoke again, her voice shaking. "You let us die so you could prepare in secret? Yes, Okonkwo did not look away. We let billions die so that trillions could live. We carried the hatred of the galaxy so that the galaxy could survive. It was the hardest choice any of us have ever made, and we make no apologies for it. She stepped forward, raising her voice. But now the preparation is over. The fleet is ready. The trap is set. And I stand before you today to announce that humanity is joining this war. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of delegate after delegate, not to hold the line, not to slow the enemy down, not to buy time for evacuation ships. Her voice rose with each word. We are joining this war to win it, to crush the swarm so completely that it will never threaten another world again, to end this nightmare once and for all. The chamber erupted. Some delegates shouted in disbelief. Others wept openly. A few simply stared at the massive fleet displayed above them, unable to process what they were seeing. Kelvith pushed his way through the crowd until he stood directly below the podium. His eyes were wet, his voice breaking. "Why should we believe you?" he asked after everything. "Why should we trust humanity now?" Okonkwo looked down at him. For a moment, her calm mask slipped, and he saw the pain beneath it. The weight of all those years, all those deaths. "You do not have to trust us," she said quietly. "You only have to watch. In 48 hours, the human fleet will engage the swarm's main force at Kethra Station. You can send observers. You can see for yourselves what we have built." She stood up straight, her voice ringing through the chamber one final time. For 300 years, humanity has been silent. Today, that silence ends. We will fight beside you. We will bleed beside you. And when this war is over, we will stand together in a galaxy free from the swarm. She touched the podium controls, and the display changed. It showed the swarm's position, its forces spread across the stars. And it showed the human fleet moving into position like a great net closing around its prey. "The trap is set," Okonkwo said. "The hunters have become the hunted." She smiled, and for the first time in 300 years, it was a smile of pure, fierce joy. Humanity has spoken, and the swarm will learn to fear our voice. The swarm had never known fear. For 10,000 years, it had swept across galaxies. It consumed worlds. It devoured civilizations. It learned from every battle and evolved past every weapon. Nothing could stop it. Nothing could slow it down. It was the perfect predator, and the universe was its hunting ground. The swarm did not think like other creatures. It had no individual minds, no separate beings. It was one vast consciousness spread across millions of bodies. When a drone saw something, the entire swarm saw it. When a hive ship learned something, every part of the network knew it instantly. This made the swarm nearly impossible to surprise. This made the swarm nearly impossible to defeat, but the swarm had never met humanity, Admiral. James Chen stood on the bridge of the dreadnought unconquered and watched the enemy fleet appear on his screens. The swarm had gathered its largest force ever at Kethra Station, the last stronghold of the Concorde's defensive line. 3 million drones. 200 hive ships. Enough firepower to destroy every remaining fleet in the galaxy. The swarm expected another easy victory. Another feast of screaming prey. It was about to be very disappointed. "All ships report status," Chen said calmly. The responses came in quickly. 12,000 human warships, spread across 3 attack groups. 400,000 fighters in support craft, every weapon charged. Every shield at full power. 300 years of preparation, about to be put to the test. "The Concorde observer ships are in position," his tactical officer reported. "Ambassador Kelvith is watching from the carrier Remembrance." Chen nodded. Let them watch. Let them see what humanity had built while the galaxy called them cowards. "Begin the approach," he ordered. "Formation Omega, execute on my mark." The human fleet moved forward. On the screens, the swarm responded immediately. Millions of drones shifted their patterns, adapting to the new threat. The hive ships began generating their defensive screens. The bioorganic shields that had stopped every weapon the Concorde could throw at them. The swarm had seen this dance before. A new enemy appeared. The enemy attacked. The swarm adapted, The enemy died. It had worked every time for 10,000 years. Enemy drones engaging, the tactical officer said. They are using standard interception patterns. Let them come. Chen watched the first wave of swarm drones approach. They moved like a black cloud, millions of bodies acting as one. Activate primary weapons. Show them what 300 years of research looks like. The human ships opened fire. The galaxy had never seen weapons like these. The Concorde's best cannons could barely scratch swarm armor. Human weapons tore through it like paper. The first wave of drones simply vanished, destroyed so completely that nothing remained but scattered atoms. On the remembrance. Kelvith gripped his seat and stared at the screen in disbelief. Possible, he whispered. That is impossible, the swarm reacted instantly. Its hive mind processed the new threat and began adapting. The second wave of drones changed their armor, their shields, their approach patterns. They had learned from the first attack and evolved to counter it. It was what the swarm always did. It was why the swarm always won. The human weapons shifted frequencies. The second wave died just as quickly as the first. The swarm adapted again. The human weapons changed again. Over and over, faster than any observer could follow. The swarm threw everything it had at the human fleet, and everything it threw was destroyed. How are they doing this? Kelvith demanded. The swarm learns. The swarm adapts. Nothing stays effective against it for long. One of his officers shook his head in amazement. The human weapons are changing faster than the swarm can evolve. Every time it adapts, they are already prepared with a counter. It is like they knew what the swarm would do before it did it, because they did know. For 30 years, humanity had watched the swarm fight. They had analyzed every battle, every adaptation, every evolution. They had built predictive models that could forecast exactly how the swarm would respond to any weapon, any tactic. Any strategy the swarm was learning from this battle, but humanity had already learned from every battle that came before. Admiral Chen watched the enemy numbers drop. 2 million drones destroyed. Then 2.5 million. The hive ships were pulling back now, trying to regroup. Phase 2, Chen ordered. Activate the network disruptors. New weapons fired. These did not destroy the swarm. They did something far worse. The swarm's hive mind was a network. A web of connections that linked every drone and every hive ship into a single consciousness. Cut those connections, and the swarm was not an army anymore. It was just a collection of confused animals. Human ships began broadcasting on frequencies that the swarm used for communication. But they were not speaking. They were screaming, noise, static, interference, designed specifically to disrupt the hive minds. Signals. The effect was immediate. Drones that had been moving in perfect coordination began to drift aimlessly. Hive ships that had been directing the battle fell silent, their crews suddenly cut off from the greater consciousness. The vast network that had made the swarm invincible shattered into a million isolated pieces. The enemy is in disarray, the tactical officer reported, his voice shaking with emotion. They are not coordinating. They are fighting as individuals. Then finish it, Chen said. All ships engage at will. The human fleet swept forward like a wave. The battle that followed was not a fight. It was a harvest. Confused and alone, the swarm drones were easy targets. The hive ships tried to flee, but human ships were faster. Their engines powered by technology the galaxy had never seen. On the remembrance. Kelvith watched the greatest swarm force ever assembled being torn apart. Tears ran down his face, but he did not wipe them away. They are actually winning, he said softly. The humans are actually winning. The battle lasted 6 hours. By the end, 3 million swarm drones were destroyed. Every hive ship was either dead or captured. The force that had been meant to end the Concorde forever was simply gone. Admiral War. Chen's face appeared on the communication screens. Of every allied ship, says Admiral Chen of the United Earth Fleet, he said. The Battle of Cathris Station is over. The swarm has been defeated. I repeat, the swarm has been defeated. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was thick with emotion. For 300 years, humanity waited in silence. We watched you suffer. We watched you die. We carried your hatred and your scorn because we knew that one day we would need to be ready. Today, we were ready. Today, we proved that the swarm can be beaten. He straightened in his chair, his eyes blazing with determination. This war is not over. There are still billions of swarm drones spread across the galaxy. But today, we showed them something they have never known before. His voice rose, carrying to every ship, every station, every world that was listening. Today, we showed them fear. And we will not stop until every last one of them is destroyed. The silence is over. Humanity has joined the war, and we will not rest until we have won it. Across the galaxy, the survivors of 1,000 species heard his words. And for the first time in years, they dared to hope. The war lasted 2 more years. After the Battle of Kethra Station, the galaxy changed. Species that had been ready to surrender found new strength. Fleets that had scattered regrouped and joined the fight. Refugees who had given up hope picked up weapons and returned to the stars. Humanity did not fight alone. Admiral Chen shared Earth's technology freely with any species that asked. Human engineers worked alongside Varani shipbuilders. Human scientists trained R'Lani weapons experts. Human tacticians planned operations with commanders from 100 different worlds. Some species were suspicious at first. 300 years of silence was not easy to forget. But as the months passed and the victories mounted, the suspicion faded. Humanity had said they would fight beside the galaxy. They had kept their word. System by system, the swarm was pushed back. The network disruptors that humanity had developed spread to every allied fleet. The tactics that human admirals had designed were taught to every allied commander. What had once been a desperate, losing war became a methodical campaign of liberation. Worlds that had been dark for years saw allied ships appear in their skies. Refugees returned to their homes to begin rebuilding. The red marks on the galaxy map that showed swarm territory began to shrink. Dr. Evelyn Okonkwo watched the war from her post on the diplomatic station. She had work to do that was just as important as the fighting. Treaties to negotiate. Alliances to build. A galaxy to unite for the final push against the enemy. Ambassador Kelvith visited her office one evening near the end of the 2nd year of the war. He looked different than he had before. The anger that had burned in his eyes was gone, replaced by something softer. He had fought in a dozen battles since Kethra Station. He had seen human soldiers die to protect Varani civilians. He had watched human medics work for days without sleep to save wounded allies. He had begun to understand. "We have received word from the front," he said. "The fleet has reached the swarm's origin point. The final battle will begin within the hour." Konkwo nodded slowly. "I know. Admiral Chen sent me a message this morning. He asked if you would like to observe. There is a place on the command ship for you, if you want it." Konkwo considered the offer. She had spent 300 years preparing for this moment. She had carried the weight of every death, every hard choice, every sleepless night. Part of her wanted to be there when it finally ended, but another part of her knew that her place was here, building the future that would come after. "Tell the Admiral that I am grateful," she said. "But my work is here. This war will end today. The peace that follows will last for centuries. I need to make sure we build it right." Kelvith nodded. He understood. He had learned a great deal about humans in the past 2 years. "There is something I need to say," he said quietly. "Before the war ends, before things change again," Okonkwo waited. "I hated you," Kelvith said. "For years, I hated everything about humanity. I thought you were cowards. I thought you were monsters. I stood in the council chamber and called for Earth to be expelled from the Concord. I remember I was wrong." The words came hard, but he forced them out. "I did not understand what you were doing. I could not see the plan behind the silence. All I could see was my own pain, my own loss." He took a breath. "I am sorry." Okonkwo's eyes grew wet. After all these years, after all the hatred and the grief and the burden, someone finally understood. "You do not need to apologize," she said. "Your anger was justified. Everything you've said about us was true. We did watch your world die. We did let billions suffer, so that we could prepare in secret. She paused. We made the right choice. But that does not make it an innocent choice. How do you live with it? Kelvith asked. How do you carry that weight? We carry it together. Okonkwo walked to her window and looked out at the stars. Every human leader who knew the truth shares the burden. Every admiral, every diplomat, every scientist who worked on Project Prometheus. We support each other. We remind each other why we made the choices we made. She turned back to face him. And now we carry it with you. With all of you. The galaxy is not just humanity's responsibility anymore. It belongs to all of us. The victories and the failures, the triumphs and the costs. Kelvith extended his hand. It was a human gesture, one he had learned years ago and never forgotten. Then let us carry it together, he said, as allies. As friends, Okonkwo took his hand and held it tight. The final battle took 12 hours. The swarm's origin point was a dying star, surrounded by ancient structures that had drifted through the void for millions of years. Here the enemy had first emerged. Here it would make its last stand. The fighting was fierce. The swarm threw everything it had left at the Allied fleet, but the Allies were ready. Human ships led the charge, their weapons tearing through the enemy's defenses. Varani cruisers guarded the flanks. R'Lani carriers launched wave after wave of fighters Admiral Chen commanded from the Bridge of the Unconquered. He had not slept in 3 days. He had lost friends in this war, good people who had given their lives for the cause. He would make sure their sacrifice was not wasted. The final Hive Queen died at midnight, Galactic Standard Time. Her death scream echoed through the hive mind network, and then there was silence. The remaining swarm drones, suddenly cut off from all guidance, drifted aimlessly. Some were destroyed, others simply shut down, their biological systems failing without the network to sustain them. Chen watched the last enemy signals fade from his screen. For a long moment he could not speak, Admiral. His tactical officer said softly, "Sir, are you all right?" Chen wiped his eyes. "I am fine. I am just. I never thought I would live to see this day." He activated the fleet-wide communication channel. His voice reached every ship, every soldier, every survivor who had fought to reach this moment. "The war is over," he said simply. "The swarm is destroyed. We have won." The celebration that followed would be remembered for generations. On every world and every station, people wept and laughed and held each other. Species that had been strangers became friends. Old enemies became allies. The galaxy that had been torn apart by war began to come together in peace, and in her office on the diplomatic station. Finally allowed herself to cry. Not tears of grief, but tears of relief, of joy, of hope for the future that humanity had fought so hard to protect. 300 years of silence, 2 years of war, and now, finally a galaxy at peace. Humanity had spoken. The stars had listened. And the universe would never forget the day when Earth ended its silence and saved them all.